conference. So today, or right now, I'd like to start with our first speaker. As I mentioned before, we'll have opening keynotes, as keynotes throughout the conference. We'll also have country ambassadors, and we'll also have pitches. The first speaker we have today is Axel Schultze. Axel, of course, is the co-founder and chair of the World Innovations Forum. Good morning, Axel.
Good morning, Douglas. How are you?
Doing very well. How about yourself?
Good.
Very good. As you may see from the window in the background, Axel is also enjoying the sunny weather here in Switzerland. As a short introduction, for those of you who don't quite know him yet, Axel himself is a highly innovative entrepreneur, changing the face of text distribution way back in the 1980s. And he built a $5 billion tech distribution with an entirely new business model. So he understands something himself about disruption and innovation in our current economy. In 1997, he built the first company with a digital stock exchange. And in 2000, he created one of the first software as a service-based businesses worldwide. And so once again, has a proven track record of disrupting economies with innovative business models. From 2015, he's devoted himself to helping startups worldwide, together with his wife, Marita, to create disruptive business models, excuse me, and doing that in a methodological way. And it's exactly that way that we're going to be listening to in the first keynote address. The title of Axel's talk is Innovation with Purpose. Axel, may I hand the floor over to you?
All right, thank you so much, Douglas. And yeah, also from my side, thank you very much for coming, everybody. It was a real big race over the last couple of weeks, trying to get people from sort of all over the country, all over the planet, actually, over the country, from every country. And so thanks a lot. And I think we have roughly 45 countries present today or now. And as we know from last time, it's probably growing. Let me dive into my opening keynote, which is about innovation with purpose. And it's actually also the Agenda 2030 of the World Innovations Forum. We would like to share with you where we're trying to go, because when we started in 2019, we crafted one sentence, and that was our vision. We envision a world where prosperity is possible for all nations through innovation and entrepreneurship. And it has been an interesting ride for us in the first year to see how we communicate what we think is possible, and also how we communicate that it's not us that want to make that, but it's actually us who are at best stimulating others to make it happen. And so we learned a lot from all the pioneers in this space in various countries, from our ambassadors, from their respective teams. We have up to, I think, over 10 people on the volunteer side in each country. And that is also another thank you very much worth from our side, from my side. I'm very proud to see that how many people are helping, not us, helping the country to get up. And that's the whole theme of what we're trying to do, empowering and inspiring. So we're looking for equal prosperity, and we believe that together with the respective countries, from within the countries, we can jointly achieve that. And innovation and entrepreneurship is a lot about big dreams, very bold. And so I thought I'm starting with the universe. I mean, that is certainly big. And as we all know, we live in a galaxy called Milky Way, which is part of a local cluster of millions of galaxies, which is part of a larger supercluster of, again, billions of galaxies. And if you look on the screen, so there's a little tiny point that we cannot even see, and that's planet Earth. And planet Earth is truly a paradise. because if we look around as much as we can, we see a lot of planets with rocks and no water, heat, gases, and so forth, but nothing like we have. I mean, there are some out there, but they're in the very far distance. So coming to innovation with purpose, I think this is what we need to think about when we innovate. We have this beautiful planet and we have shaped it already. And I think this is a nature-given process because we haven't invented innovation. It's a gift that we have gotten. And possibly it's made nature's best bet to create a creature that is innovative enough to actually not only shape the planet, but at one point in time, maybe shape a whole solar system or a galaxy, and maybe save what is created here, life, biological life, in front of possibly, a stormy weather outside in this universe. So our drive for innovation is a drive that is across the world. It's not invented in any kind of culture. It's actually existing since 300,000 years. And so based on the data and the technology, we can envision our world being a microscopic part of a world of billions of galaxies. And today, about 40 developed nations on this planet have actually a status, so-called status, of being furthest developed. And if we look into time, about 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years in the future, we would look like Neanderthals compared to where we're going. We believe that by 2030, this is in the one decade, this is by end of this decade, we will see about 80 developed countries from Southeast Asia, from Africa, parts of Latin America, and possibly some even from Eastern Europe. By 2038, about 160 most of the Asian and African companies, Latin America and North America, will be possibly developed countries. Based on the inner urge of the population to grow, will become a developed country, not because somebody wants it. For us as an organization, it was very important right from the beginning that we don't help a country to become a developed country based on our belief that this is possible. We're a help organization, and we're one of the very few NGOs or nonprofit organizations or whatever you want to call it that is actually driven by its owners, Marita and myself. We don't have a program to fulfill. We don't have a strategy to complete. We don't have a vision from somebody else to complete. It's basically ours. And if we're failing, then it's our failure. And if we're winning, it's the winning of all of us. And that's one of the things of those helping organizations. So we want to help those countries who want to get help. And this started with one nation, and that started with a nation in Southeast Asia known as Nepal. And Kimla Kai was back then one of the Nepali who I met, and he said, Axel, you have to come to Nepal and do your entrepreneurial keynote that you just did in Lucerne, also in Nepal. It wasn't quite on my calendar or on my agenda, but I said to Marita, hey, let's go to Nepal. What do you think? Yeah, why not? And so we realized that our appearance there, where we didn't do anything other than talk, and we didn't influence anybody other than inspiring, started actually out to become, a kind of a drive in entrepreneurship that we realized it doesn't take a lot to make a country prosper, but it takes a lot to kill it. And unfortunately, we do too much to kill countries by telling them what to do. That's something we don't want to do. So we looked in the past because we can learn best what's happening in the future when we're looking into the past. Draw a trajectory, how we can go. And many of you have seen this chart as a whole presentation, and I put it into one slide. When we look into the developed countries like Switzerland, Germany, France, the US, and lately Korea, we see a few people Alfred Escher, one guy at the time in 1880 where Switzerland was the poorest country in Europe, and turning it upside down through his innovative ideas and his entrepreneurial spirit. In Germany, almost at the same time, Carl Benz, he created a car, and he wanted to have the car built and have people be able to drive much faster and much easier from one point to the other. And Robert Bosch actually helped him back in the days with all the electronics that he needed to build this engine that actually fires and ignites his pressure chamber, and so the motor could run. There's a guy by the name of René Loren, a little bit later, France. He actually developed the jet engine. And if we continue, we see people like Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, who actually are sort of the first two that we can call them the creator of Silicon Valley. And in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, Lee Boeing-chul from Korea and Chung-Yo Young, also from Korea, actually made Korea, which was the poorest country in Southeast Asia, to the most developed in Southeast Asia. And so we're seeing that there's a handful of people who just have crazy ideas and wanted to go. Now we have, unfortunately, a counterforce, and this is the rest of the world, who believes that they know what you need to do in order to be successful. And this is unfortunately a very unfortunate idea. Nobody can tell you what you need to do to be successful. When Alfred Escher thought he built a railroad from Zurich to Basel, two cities in Switzerland, nobody needed a railroad. Carl Benz, who built a car, nobody needed a car back then. Germany was poor. And René Loren in France was already a little bit of wealthier country, but nobody needed a jet engine. And I can continue and continue. Nobody needed what these guys have built. Yet it was the foundation of a multi-trillion-dollar economy. So what we as an organization want to do is we don't want to stop you. Build however crazy and however meaningless your idea might be. We want to help you as entrepreneurs drive and live your entrepreneurial dream. And if that is going into the universe is one thing, if you're going down to the core of the earth is another thing, if it's just planting a little different plant, it's a third thing, whatever it is. Entrepreneurs cannot be told what to do. They cannot be stopped, because if you stop them, they go to a different country and be successful there. And so this is something we have to embrace, not only amongst us, but amongst politicians and organizations, NGOs, and whoever, with all the best wishes, want to help, that help, and only in this little space, entrepreneurship, is probably not that successful. So we looked at the talent development in the current world. So as you can see, the Western world, so to speak, is dominated by universities. And we realized as a nation and as countries and as continents in the developed world that what differentiates us most is education. That is true, but we have forgotten why and when we created our education. It was essentially when we needed people in our respective industries, then we trained them. That was very simple. Innovation was driven by educated people to 0.007%, but education itself was driven by the industry that needed certain specialties. But that has changed. In the emerging countries, the Western world built universities to educate. And I think it was a good idea. It was a good intention, but it wasn't how nature actually worked. And the result is that in the next 10 years, we have approximately 1 billion students from currently developed countries graduating from universities and standing in front of a job market that does not exist. And here is the sad why. everybody in the Western world who has money focuses on so-called micro businesses. These micro businesses, unfortunately, don't create jobs other than for themselves. But since entrepreneurial spirits are a rather minority in our human world, so there is a few who have a job, but there is a much larger portion of people who have no job and currently seem to have no job. So we need to make a major shift in our thinking. And this major shift will go into creating companies. But we cannot order to create companies. And there is no human, no government, anybody on the planet that can say we need more companies. Companies are created by entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs want to do their crazy ideas. So we're living in a rather complex situation that we cannot create companies, we cannot create jobs anyway, other than government jobs, so we can take a couple people off the street. But we need to stimulate the company building by empowering entrepreneurs to build companies. Teams that are coming up with unique ideas. Businesses will creating jobs, and only businesses becoming part of a global economy is part of these company building process, and making a country autonomous. That actually leads to prosperity and completely eradicating poverty. And so with the pressure of doing something for a mistake we made a couple of years ago, to just educating anybody without even thinking about what this education will bring to them and what it does to the society, we're now under pressure to fix that problem with actually probably a very good fix. Stimulating entrepreneurs to build up their company with ideas that may not be reasonable or possible today, but we know for a fact from all developed countries in the past that this is possible, and we have seen them. This is a picture, some of you from, I guess, Nigeria and Uganda even recognize faces. This was here in Zurich, and we realized, and you can see this from how the people look at these presentations. You said, wow, we had no idea that these nations can do that. They're equal to all of us. The only thing we have in our minds as Westerners are trips maybe to Uganda and to Nigeria and to Kenya, where we're drawn as tourists into some camps where people doing their jump and dance without even understanding that these countries are equally developed like everybody else. We just don't see it. And so what we see as our opportunity is help to actually get across the nations prosperity. We realize that only organization can actually create propelling jobs and drive an economy. And here's a picture that I particularly love. And the story behind this is cracking an egg from the outside. And this is what most of us in the Western world trying to do will mean death. But letting it crack from the inside is almost always new life. We don't want to come with a plan. We don't want to come with a strategy. We don't want to come with resources, not even with money. Because if you look into the past, the poorest countries in the world back 200 years ago, or one of the poorest in these continents, were actually the driver for innovation and entrepreneurship. And we don't want to kill this in you. So all it takes is actually inspiration to ignite something. And this is a very nice picture that also describes how Silicon Valley worked, where you probably know Marita and I lived most of our business lives. If you ignite one in a group of smart people, they ignite the rest. And the sum of this ignition is more powerful than anything else we can do. So we'd rather help you through inspiration to do something than through any other method or mechanism. And we know that this works. So this is when we started last year. We did all kinds of workshops in all kinds of countries. We did sessions and trainings. At the end of last year, we actually did, this picture is missing, our first accelerator program in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And we call this our active inspiration. There's a little bit of training, and it's the same training that we have been given in Silicon Valley. And it wasn't telling me what to do, but it giving me mechanisms that have worked, where our brain is basically part of the idea and not so much mechanisms that need to work in order to work with us. And we see a little success. And this is a company in Nepal, and this is where we started. And this was after 1.5 years, I was asked, so Axel, what can we do? We have no resources, we have no access to the sea, we have no functioning production, we have nothing. What can a country like us do? Where would you start? And I said, well, maybe I would start with software development, because you're smart and you can learn how to program, and all you need is a laptop and once in a while an internet connection. You don't even need it permanently. And people said, hey, this is cool, let's do software. And one guy, you see him here on the left-hand side, from Paila, the CEO, said, what would be the hottest to work on? And I was a little bit smiling. I thought, the hottest would be artificial intelligence. But this is so early on that you will actually have trouble to learn it. And in the moment I said this, I realized, yeah, but you have the opportunity, like everybody else, to do something. And I couldn't believe when I heard 6 months later that they produced a robot that has an AI-based system in it and that can talk like other robots can talk. But now they have fine-tuned it so it works in banks. In this crisis, they fine-tune it to something else. Actually, it works in hospitals to take stuff around, particularly in hospitals where contagious people with their coronaviruses. So the robot is actually taking the risk, but the robot is very resistant for corona viruses. An amazing story in itself, which I don't have the time to explain the whole story today, but this shows it was ignition and inspiration only. We didn't really help. I was asked to be a mentor, and I obviously said yes, but that was everything I could do. But this was also everything I needed to do, because it needs to be done by the entrepreneurs, not by anybody else. So these new lands of opportunity in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America are the new lands of opportunity. Because if we look into the current developed countries, rules and regulations, policies, and what else we have stops and brings our nations to a halt. We will see in the next 50 to 100 years that the developed world of today will no longer be the developed world. And we've seen this in Rome, we see this in the British Empire, we have seen this in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in other large nations. We don't think this is a natural progression. We think this has to do with hoping that the other goes down, that we can go up. We as humans probably need to be more powerful than that in the future, but that's not part of what we're trying to do today. So there isn't lands, actually now, lands of opportunities. And the beauty is that the power of a single dominant country probably no longer exists in our future. And that's a very healthy, balanced system. And this is what we're trying to support. And therefore I thought, think big, think space. Never forget that we have a paradise, and never forget that we have a brain. And this brain is given to us. We haven't developed it. Entrepreneurship is given to us. We haven't developed it. It's somewhere in our genes. And innovation is a talent that has been given to us, and we have to use it. And so we want to inspire you to take whatever you want to take on and actually do that. Initially, we will need volunteers to actually find these entrepreneurs, because they are in every single country. There is no country, no matter how far or less developed it is, where we cannot find entrepreneurs. And you will need to help spread the word to actually find them. And then we can work with them like we have been worked in Silicon Valley, which is still kind of the breeding spot of innovation. But innovation doesn't have anything to do with geography. It just happens that it was there. It happened in Africa, which is basically the birthplace of humans. But then we spread. And I think we need to spread the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship as well. Entrepreneurs don't need any special education. They don't need any special skills. They don't need any inheritance or any parents or anything special. When you look at the most successful entrepreneurs from around the world, they have one pattern: no pattern. They come from anywhere and anything. There is no pattern for something. That means everyone can be an entrepreneur. And we will find your first entrepreneur, and that is an amazing start. We don't need hundreds. None of the developed world has been powered up by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs. It was a handful. There's another handful coming, and another handful. And over time, it evolved. And that's what we're trying to help. So the World Innovations Forum agenda for 2030 is, and this is for the next 10 years, inspiring and empowering top talented entrepreneurs, supporting them on their way to the top. Meaning we support them and their way, not our way, to the top. Motivating amazing local economy developers is what we need. And we need the help to identify and find these talented entrepreneurs, because most of them didn't even know that they are talented entrepreneurs. I didn't. I was a bad kid. I was a lazy kid. I was bad at school. And somebody said, hey, you're a smart ass. Excuse my language. I thought, well, me? No, certainly not. But I realized that this guy, which I respected a lot, didn't say this just as a joke. He said, no, you the way you think is actually pretty cool. I thought, okay, wow. And I learned over time that I have this entrepreneurial gift. I didn't know it in the beginning. And most of the entrepreneurs that don't live anywhere in the world that I have seen didn't know either. So we need people who actually help develop this economy by finding entrepreneurs. And even if we found them, they need a network of other innovative minds, not necessarily entrepreneurs, but people who want to work for a startup, work in a startup, help and build it together. So this is an effort of togetherness. That is not an effort of the World Innovations Forum per se. And with that, I thank you very much for listening, and I wish you a wonderful 3 days. And we hope that we kind of fuse together over these 3 days with the same spirit, helping the world to be equal in terms of prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Axel, and also a warm round of applause from our virtual audience. I see we now have about 100 people listening online. Just wanted to point out, we had a question from Henrietta from Rwanda, Axel, that I believe you've answered, which was about creating innovation in new business. And I think the messages of innovate and inspire are well taken. Also, the focus on micro businesses and dreaming bigger is actually one of your main messages too. You've, of course, as an educator or in institutional education, you've also heard some challenging messages about the role of education in today's society. Your particular view, Axel, if you could do it all over again, would you go down the same path, or would you have a different approach, let's say?
That's a tough question.
Thank you.
Because you never know. But I mean, honestly, I have to say I would do it all over again. Because at the end of the day, I have to say I was lucky, really lucky to live a very satisfying life, rewarding life, and the rewards come from those who I could help. And so I crafted this one message once, you know, people are never basically rewarded for taking, but for giving. And that is something that I try to also get to the entrepreneurs. If you give to your country, that's far more rewarding than you take and getting a rich guy, you know, drive my Ferrari. It's nice, I have to say so, but that's not rewarding.
Excellent. Okay, Axel, thank you very much. I believe it's time for us to move on to our next speaker.